I answered on the third ring because I didn't recognize the number. Jossette. My mother's voice burst through the speaker, bright enough to sound rehearsed. I frowned. Mom! Oh, good. Listen carefully. Your sister's wedding is in 3 days, and I need you here for the family portraits. Your grandparents are commie. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask where I was. She didn't even pause long enough to see if I wanted to speak. I leaned back in my office chair and stared out the 22nd floor window at the unfamiliar sky. I won't be there, I said quietly. She laughed, not politely, not nervously, the kind of laugh someone gives when they're convinced you've made a joke. Very funny, just drive over Friday afternoon. I can't. The laughter disappeared. What do you mean you can't? Because I moved across the country 8 months ago. Silence. Complete silence. For the first time since answering the phone, my mother had nothing to say. Then her voice came back, sharper this time. You did what? I moved. You moved across the country. Yes, without telling us. Her outrage arrived faster than her curiosity. Not once did she ask why. Not once did she ask whether I was safe. Not once did she ask if I was happy. Instead, all she cared about was how I dared make a decision without her permission. And that's when I realized nothing had changed. I had disappeared from their lives for 8 entire months. They hadn't noticed. The only reason they were calling now was because they suddenly needed me. My name is Jossette Bennett. I'm 31 years old, and until 8 months ago, I spent my entirety. My younger sister, Vanessa, had always been the center of everything. If she won an award, we celebrated for days. If she had a bad week, family dinners revolved around comforting her. If she needed help planning something, everyone else's schedules magically became flexible, including mine, especially mine. Growing up, I convinced myself that if I stayed patient, if I worked harder, if I caused fewer problems instead, I became convenient, reliable, expected, never appreciated. When I started my career as a financial compliance analyst, I thought becoming successful might finer it didn't. Every achievement somehow became another opportunity to help Vanessa. Every promotion meant I was doing well enough to sacrifice more of my own time. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being their daughter. I became their backup plan, the extra set of hands, the dependable one they could ignore because they assumed I'd always be there. Apparently, I wasn't. My mother finally found her voice again. Jossette, why would you do something like this without telling your own parents? I looked around my office. The framed photos on my bookshelf weren't from family gatherings anymore. The coffee mug on my desk had been a gift from coworkers who actually knew my birthday. Outside my window stretched a city my parents didn't even know I lived in. I answered with the calmest voice I'd ever used around her. You never noticed I was gone. Silence on the other end of the line lasted just long enough for me to wonder if she'd hung up. Then my mother inhaled sharply. That's ridiculous, she snapped. Don't be dramatic. I rested my elbow on my desk. I'm not. You expect me to believe you disappeared for 8 months and somehow that's our fault. I didn't say that. You don't have to, you're implying it. I almost laughed. Even now, she wasn't asking where I lived. She wasn't asking whether I was okay. She wasn't asking if I'd needed help moving across the country by myself. Everything had become a trial where she was the defendant and I was somehow the one on trial. You should have told us, she insisted. I did tell you something important once. When I accepted a promotion. There was another pause. I don't remember that. I know. The words slipped out without anger, just certainty. My eyes drifted toward the rain beginning to fall outside my office windows, and memories I hadn't V8 months earlier. My parents had invited everyone over for Sunday dinner. Vanessa was there with her fiancé, Tyler, showing off wedding magazines spread across the dining room table. My father barely looked up from carving the roast. So, Mom said proudly, we've narrowed it down to 3 venues. Vanessa smiled. I think the vineyard is prettier. Dad nodded immediately. Whatever makes you happy. I waited for a lull in the conversation. There's actually something I'd like to share. Looked at me, I smiled anyway. I was offered a senior position. Oh, it was the quickest acknowledgement I'd received all evening. It's a leadership role. I'd be overseeing an entire compliance division. Nice, Mom replied absently as she examined flower samples. Vanessa, do you still like Roman IV? Vanessa leaned closer. I think cream photographs better. The conversation drifted away before I could finish. I tried again. Position would require relocating. MMHMM, Dad murmured without looking up. Vanessa suddenly gasped. Oh, what about the string quartet? Mom clapped excitedly. That's exactly what we've been missing. My promotion vanished from the room in less than 5 seconds. No congratulations, no questions, no excitement, nothing. I quietly folded the offer letter and slipped it back into my purse while everyone debated center pie. That was the night something inside me changed. A week later, I accepted the promotion. I signed the paperwork electronically. I rented an apartment nearly 2,000 miles away. I scheduled movers. I transferred my utilities. I changed my banking address. I even forwarded my mail. Every step felt strangely peaceful. Part of me kept expecting my phone to ring. Maybe Mom would suddenly remember. Maybe Dad would ask when I was leaving. Maybe Vanessa would realize I wasn't around anymore. No one called. The moving truck arrived on a Thursday morning. My neighbors waved goodbye. My coworkers took me out for lunch before my flight. The people I'd known for only 3 years noticed I was leaving. My own family didn't. Back in the present, my mother's voice cracked through the speaker. Families don't just disappear from each other. I closed my eyes. No, she sounded relieved. I knew you'd understand. I finished the thought anyway. Families usually notice when someone leaves. Her breathing became heavier. Always been sensitive. You always make everything personal. What do you want me to say? The truth, she scoffed. The truth is you're trying to ruin your sister's wedding because you're jealous. I actually smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone finally realizing they no longer needed to defend themselves. Not ruining anything. Then come home. I have a home. What is that supposed to mean? It means I already live where people notice when I'm missing. She fell quiet. For a brief moment, I wondered if she'd finally understood. Instead, she whispered, "If you don't come, you'll break your sister's heart." I stood, picked up my coffee, and walked toward my office window. My life doesn't exist to protect Vanessa's feelings. Before she could answer, another call lit up my phone. The caller ID made me freeze. It was my Aunt Linda. She had never called me directly before. Why now Aunt Linda called twice before I answered? "Jossette," she said carefully. "Your mother told everyone you refused to come to Vanessa's wedding." There it was, not concern, damage control. What exactly did she tell you? Linda hesitated. "You're upset about Vanessa getting married. That you've been distant for Mont." I stared at my phone. 8 months of silence, and suddenly I was the problem. "I moved across the country 8 months ago," I said. "What?" "Mom found out today." Linda went silent. She didn't know. No, before she could respond, 3 more messages appeared, one from my cousin, one from my uncle, one from Vanessa. Mom had clearly started calling people. I ended the conversation with Linda politely, then opened Vanessa's message. "Call me." Now 30 seconds later, my phone rang. "Are you seriously doing this?" Vanessa demanded. "Doing what?" "Making my wedding about you." Leaned against my desk. I wasn't planning to attend. "That's exactly the problem. Mom already told people you'd be there." "Then Mom shouldn't have done that." Seating chart is printed. The photographer has a whole family setup planned. Grandma keeps asking. I said nothing. Vanessa's voice tightened. "You can't just disappear because you're in one of your moods." "I didn't disappear because of a mood." "Whatever, just get on a plane." "No," her tone changed, less angry, more calculating. "Jossette, people are going to notice." I frowned. "Notice what?" She exhaled. "Mom said if you're not there, people are going to start asking questions." That sentence landed harder than any insult. Not, "I miss you," not, "I want my sister there," not even, "This matters to me." Questions, that was what they feared. People noticing the empty chair. People wondering why one daughter hadn't shown up for the family photographs. People realizing the Bennett family wasn't nearly as perfect as Diane Bennett liked everyone to believe. "So that's why you called," I said. Vanessa scoffed. "Of course I want you there." "When was the last time you called me before today?" Silence. "When was the last time Mom asked how I was doing?" "Jossette, when was the last time Dad even asked where I was?" "You know, everyone's been busy." 8 months busy." She didn't answer. I looked at the growing list of messages from relatives who suddenly cared enough to question me. Then I made a decision. There was an old email thread I'd saved years ago. Family dinner invitations, last-minute cancellations, requests for help with Vanessa, messages from me that went unanswered. One exchange in particular showed exactly how normal it had become to treat me like an afterthought. I forwarded it to Aunt Linda, no commentary, no explanation, just the thread. Then I locked my phone. For the first time, I wasn't defending myself. I was letting their own words do it for me. The first reply arrived less than an hour later. It wasn't from my mother. It was from Aunt Linda, **Jossette. I don't know what to say. I never saw these emails. Can we talk, ***. I stared at the screen for a moment before calling her. She answered immediately. "I read the whole thread," she said quietly. "So did you notice anything?" "I noticed you kept asking if family dinner was still on. Every single time your mother canceled, it was because Vanessa needed something. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. There were dozens more. Linda sighed. I honestly thought you were just busy with work all these years. So did everyone else. By the next morning, more relatives had begun reaching out, not accusing me, asking questions. My Uncle David called before I even finished my coffee. Your aunt forwarded me the emails. I figured she might. I have to ask you something. Ahead, when exactly did you move? 8 months ago. Your parents only found out yesterday. Yes, he was quiet for several seconds. Finally, he asked the question I'd been wondering myself. Jossette, how could they not know? They never asked. By that afternoon, the carefully managed version of events my mother had been spreading was beginning. Several relatives started comparing memories. One remembered inviting me to Thanksgiving only to be told by Mom that I was too busy. Another remembered asking why I wasn't at a family barbecue. Mom had answered, "Work always comes first for Jossette." A cousin remembered sending me birthday wishes online after noticing nobody had posted family photos. One story alone could be dismissed. Years of them lining up together couldn't. The phone buzzed again. Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. This time she didn't sound furious. She sounded exhausted. Jossette, I waited. I need you to stop talking to everyone. I haven't called anyone. They're calling you. They're asking questions. They don't need answers. I walked toward my apartment window. Outside, people crossed the street beneath bright afternoon sunlight, completely unaware that my family 2,000 miles away. They deserve the truth. Her voice trembled. Families make mistakes. They do. We're trying. No, Mom, what do you mean? You're trying to stop people from finding out. She inhaled sharply. Please. It was the first time she'd pleaded with me instead of ordering me. Wedding is this weekend. I know, if this keeps spreading. She stopped herself. I waited, then she finally admitted what this had always been about. If you don't come, people are going to think we're terrible parents. There it was, not, I miss you. I'm sorry. Even, come because you're my daughter. Only reputation, only appearances. I closed my eyes. Everything suddenly made sense. The phone call, the urgency. The rehearsed excitement, the family portraits, the insistence that I return. None of it had been about me. It had been about protecting the image they'd spent years creating. I spoke calmly. Then there's something you should finally know. I heard her breathing quicken. Before she could interrupt, I ended the call. I didn't answer another phone call that evening. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for the email I'd spent months pretending didn't exist. The subject line was still there. Asterisk, asterisk, congratulations on your promotion. Asterisk, asterisk, I clicked it open. Reading it again transported me back almost a year. It had been the biggest opportunity of my career. A regional director had recommended me for a newly created leadership position that would oversee a significant salary increase. Relocation Assisi had been ecstatic. Not because of the money, because I had finally accomplished something I had worked toward for years. The only people I wanted to celebrate with were my parents. Instead, I became an inconvenience. A week after accepting the offer, my mentor, Karen, asked if I had decided to postpone my relocation I already accepted. I had told her. She looked confused. I know, that's why I was surprised. Surprised by what? Karen hesitated before answering. Your mother called someone in human resources. I felt my stomach tight. What? She said your family desperately needed you to stay in town until after your sister's wedding. HS. For a moment, I couldn't even process the words. My mother contacted my employer. Karen nodded. She didn't reach me directly. Spoke with someone in HR who mentioned it to me because they vowed there wasn't. I figured that out. Karen slid a folder across the desk. I told them your relocation date wasn't changing. I sat there in complete silence. Karen finally asked the question no one in my family ever had. What do you want to do, Jossette? I already knew the answer. I want to leave. Just the city, everything. That evening I drove home without stopping at my parents' house. I didn't confront them. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for explanations, because I already knew what they would say. Vanessa needed me. The wedding was important. Family came first. Only somehow. Family had always meant everyone except me, so I quietly made a different plan. I found an apartment in my new city. I transferred every account into my own name. I updated my emergency contacts. I changed my mailing address. I removed my parents from every document that gave them access to my life. Then I packed my belongings and left. I decided that if they genuinely wanted me in their lives, they would notice. 8 months passed. They never did. Until they needed another family photograph by Friday afternoon, relatives had pieced together enough of the story that no one believed my Aunt Linda called again. I spoke with your grandparents. I waited. They're heartbroken. Never wanted to hurt them. They know. She paused. Your grandmother cried when she realized she'd been told for months that you were always working. I closed my eyes. I wasn't. I know, Uncle David called later that evening. I'm sorry. Assuming you were choosing distance. I didn't know what else to choose. You shouldn't have had to. The first time in years, members of my extended family weren't asking me to keep the peace. They were apologizing for never noticing how alone I'd been. The wedding went ahead as planned. Vanessa still wore her beautiful dress. The flowers were arranged exactly as she'd wanted. The music played. The guests smiled. But the conversations were different. People quietly asked where I was. Others already knew. A few relatives gently challenged the polished stories my mother had spent years telling. No one caused a scene. No one shouted. But something much harder to repair had happened. The certainty that Diane and Richard Bennett represented the perfect family was gone. It had disappeared the moment people realized a daughter could move nearly 2,000 miles away. Vanessa was furious. Not because she'd learned how deeply I'd been hurt, because every whispered conversation felt like an insult to her wedding day. She sent one final text. **, I hope you're happy. **, I looked at it for several seconds before replying. **, I didn't do this to your wedding. I stopped protecting a story that was never true. **, she never answered. Neither did my father. Over the next few weeks, invitations arrived. Coffee, let's talk. Can we fix this? Family counseling. I politely declined everyone. Not because I hated them. Because I finally understood something I'd spent years refusing to believe. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're protection. My new job became everything I'd hoped it would be. The team I led respected me. My coworkers celebrated my ideas instead of talking over them. When my birthday arrived, they surprised me with lunch, a cake, and a handwritten card signed by Eve. Halfway through the celebration, I realized something. The people who had known me for less than a year knew more about me than my own parents ever had. That realization didn't make me sad anymore. It made me grateful. One evening, several weeks after the wedding, I stood on the balcony of my apartment as the sun descended. The city lights slowly flickered to life beneath me. My phone buzzed one last time. A notification from the old Bennett family group chat. Without opening it, I selected Leave Conversation ***. Then I blocked the remaining numbers that still carried expectations instead of love. The silence that followed wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I closed my laptop, stepped back inside my apartment, and began planning a future that belonged. I didn't leave my family because I moved across the country. I moved across the country because I'd already lost them years before.